Thank you, dear Alex, for making stretch of time, and I hope you all enjoyed the extra time this morning. Okay, and I would like to thank again for our dear friends in Scout Association of Hong Kong for that wonderful opening to our Congress. I hope you all enjoyed, right? Okay, as many of you know, this first World Scout Education Congress enjoys the kind support of the World Scouting's Messengers of Peace initiative. Before we start this morning's session, we would like to take a few minutes to show you what millions of Scouts all around the world are doing as messengers of peace to serve their communities and help to create a better world. Thank you very much. Dear friends in Scouting, welcome to day 1 and this first program session of our first World Scout Education Congress. The theme for today is society. As you can see from our program, we begin each day of our Congress here in the plenary hall with a keynote address from leading figures in the world of government, education, business, or civil society. This morning, we have the privilege to be joined by Ms. Christine Law. Christine is Undersecretary for the Environment for Hong Kong. Before joining the government, she was a CEO of a non-profit public policy think tank, Civic Exchange, and has spent nearly a decade as a politician and member of the Legislative Council in Hong Kong. Having been very active in public affairs since 1980, she has founded or served on boards of a wide range of non-governmental organizations in Hong Kong and overseas, dealing with a variety of issues, including environmental protections, urban planning design, and equal opportunity. Kristen's presentation this morning is entitled Engaging Society, a Strategy for Life. Dear friends in Scouting, please give a warm welcome to Ms. Christine Law.
Good morning and welcome to Hong Kong. On behalf of the Hong Kong SAR government, I would also like to extend the city's welcome to you all. It's a great privilege for me to have an opportunity to share some personal ideas with you. I understand from the organizers that what we want to do is to consider what kind of education and what kind of life for us all. So I'm not going to give you, I'm not going to talk about things that are in my immediate portfolio, which is the environment. I'd like to share a personal story with you about some of the things I learned as I grew up and as I started to work, and today as I'm in government. All of these, you could say, non-academic skills that I've learned. And now that I'm 57 years old, I've had a fair amount of time to filter through what are some of the most important things in my life that are the skills that I use every day. Is it going to happen? It's happened. There we are. What I want to share with you are really a series of skills that we all need. These are not actually the things that I learned at school, and I think if somebody had pointed these skills out to me earlier on in my life, I would have done better. As you can see from the picture, the ability to listen, the ability to empathize, the ability to communicate, these are all really, really important skills. But for me, the killer app is, there we go, is listening. This is something that I actively practice pretty much throughout the day. And I have found that without exception, this is the most important thing for what I do. This is not something that anyone told me until I actually became a legislator, a politician. And I was already, I think, in my probably late 30s. And I met a gentleman who's a teacher, who's a professor, and he goes around the world talking about peacemaking. And he and his wife, They've worked throughout the world, including many, many years in South Africa. And I think many of you know something about the history of South Africa. There has been a lot of violence. There have been a lot of violence within the society, and there was a need for peacemaking. And of all the things that he said to me, and I actually took some classes from them in peacemaking, the single most important skill I learned was listening. You know, we all think we know how to do it, but in fact, until I was opened to what it really means to listen, to be really able to hear the other person, to try hard, I realized listening is actually quite difficult. After I realized listening was such an important skill, I knew it's something I could practice every day. And as a politician, I think it made me a better politician because I actively sought to listen to what people had to say. This is the Chinese character for listening. And it's a beautiful character, and I actually didn't realize this until somebody pointed it out to me. Now, I know many of you probably have not seen this character before, but I think you can hear that the bit on the left, that's the ear, and that you can see that to really hear, to really be able to listen and understand, it's a total exercise of involvement. We have to involve ourselves through our physical contraption, right, the ear that listens, to our eyes, our head, and to also listen with the heart. So I'd just like you to remember this Chinese character as we go forward. Okay, well, I think you already know this. When we're trying to understand somebody, when we're trying to listen in the fullest sense of the word, there are many clues as to what the other person is trying to express. And I'm sure you've all had the situation where somebody may be saying something very nice to you, but somehow you're not so comfortable. Or sometimes somebody is saying something that seems quite unfriendly, but again, you don't feel so uncomfortable. We can use non-verbal means to communicate. So when we're listening with our full senses, we're in fact also using our full senses to observe, to hear, to feel what the other person is really trying to say. Now, of course, on the other hand, we can also appreciate when we are talking to other people how we are really expressing ourselves. So I think if we were more conscious of how we want other person to understand us, how we move our bodies, it's also something that is important. And this is very important in different cultures. Something that we are very comfortable with ourselves in our own culture may miscommunicate. So again, if we are communicating across culture, sometimes it's just useful to get a clue as to what kind of body language is more acceptable or less acceptable to others. In terms of understanding, if we are able to listen, if we're able to feel with our total self when we're with other people, then our chances of understanding what they are trying to say, what they're feeling, would be more complete. I'd like to try to have a little exercise with you, because this is what I was taught. If we wanted to listen better, if we wanted to communicate better, is there an exercise that we could do? it's the exercise of doing précis. I don't know if the word précis is familiar to you all. Certainly, when I was at primary school, this was something that was taught. And I was at primary school in Hong Kong. When we were learning English, not Chinese, but when we were learning English, I had an English teacher that wanted us to practice précis. And précis is the ability to summarize. And when I was at school, we did basically summary in writing. So we would be asked to read a story, and the teacher would want us to write what the story was about as briefly as possible. I forgot about this skill as I got out of school. Actually, until I started to work. And in my first job, I was a very lowly person in a company. And I was surprised by one skill that I learned at school, précis, that somehow stood me in very good stead. The kind of experience that I was asked to do in this company was, to go sit in meetings. And then the boss would say, well, I couldn't go to that meeting, or I had to leave. It's a 2-hour meeting. Tell me afterwards what happened. And without really thinking about doing précis, I sat in, I listened, I wasn't speaking, I was the lowliest person, I was simply observing, I was doing a summary of what happened in a 2-hour meeting. And I knew my boss only wanted to read a page. I did them very, very well, apparently. So I think it has something to do with my primary school teacher actually having taught me how to do that. But as I realized how useful this skill is, and as I started to really think about listening, I realized that we can practice active listening. So what I asked you to try and do tonight is, when you go and talk to your friends, when you go and talk to your family, especially when you talk to your family, you usually tune out, right? Because you expect that you already know what they're going to say, and especially, I guess, if we were talking to our parents, I'm usually 50% tuned out. But however, if I was truly concentrating on what they were saying, one way to give them a sense that you truly heard them is to repeat back to them in a summary format what you heard. When this was pointed out to me, as I said, I was learning from a professor about peacemaking skills. I tried this out in my political life. Very often, I have people coming to me, my constituents, and they wanted to tell me long stories of something that they were not happy about, or they were trying to tell me about a complaint that they have. I used this skill to repeat back to them in very short summary form what I thought they said. Now, you can just imagine an ordinary member of the public coming to complain about something in Hong Kong, in our district. You can just imagine that people could go on quite a long time to tell a story, in many ways, about what they were not happy about. I found that if I could repeat it back to them, what I thought I heard from them, there was an immediate rapport. Because we're all too used to going to particularly important people in position, and they know you didn't really hear them. So to be able to repeat back to somebody that you really heard them, people immediately understood that you paid them attention. And I realized this was a very, very important moment. It is in that moment, and when you talk to somebody, that the other person felt understood that you've truly communicated. So try this. Summarize. Now, obviously, comprehension is very important. If you didn't really understand what the other person was trying to say, if you really didn't catch the essence, you won't be able to do a good summary. So again, to be able to do that, to be able to hear and reflect That's the only way you can do a good summary. And so really the point that I'm trying to make here is regard this as a tremendous tool that we can use every day in our lives, at work, at play, with our families. The other point I want to make is the ability to empathize. When you've heard, when you're able to repeat back to the other person that you've heard, even if you don't agree, you've connected with the other person. And because you've heard, you've tried to understand, that's a moment where you can empathize. And to be able to empathize is to be able to give respect to the other person, and it helps us ourselves to reflect on what they've said. So particularly in peacemaking, it is so important for people with different points of views, with disagreements, to show each other the respect that at least you understood what they tried to say to each other. And if you're trying to play any kind of mediating role, then to be able to understand the crux of what the different sides are saying, to be able to empathize, to show that you understood, and you try to put yourself in the other person's shoes. That is the moment where we can feel the connection. Well, and then at some stage, we need to communicate. Now, how many times have we said to other people, or how many times have you heard from somebody that I wish you understood what I was trying to say? Well, I have another story. When I was at high school, I had a drama teacher who said to our drama class that if somebody didn't understand what you're trying to say, then put the blame on yourself. You have not communicated clearly enough if the other person didn't understand you. And I remember that because, of course, we're all complaining all the time that we're misunderstood. But when that was pointed out to me, I thought, well, that makes sense. So what I should do is try to be as clear as I can. And I didn't realize at the time, again, that was a great tip in life. If I don't think I've expressed myself well enough, then let me try again. Let me try and re-say it. Let me try and explain myself. If I'm not understood, let me give myself the responsibility to explain myself better. Well, we talked about a number of skills. Of course, each day, we all play different roles. So if I'm standing on stage, if I'm trying to talk to other people, then how can I speak clearly? How can I try to connect with you so that I'm understood? But sometimes we're not the speaker. We're listening. We're trying to see what other people are saying. So all these skills of communication, of listening, they're really one bag of tools that we're constantly using. So if we can sharpen these tools, whichever position we're in, talking, listening, we will be able to understand each other better. And when we do, our learning, our knowledge about the world, about other people, will increase. Well, then, in terms of engaging society, engaging large or small groups of people, in my own experience, these tools that I've just shared with you has been the most useful. I just want to share a little bit with you about my own journey. When I was in my young 20s, I started to ask questions about social issues in Hong Kong. Some people would say I fell in with a bad crowd. Actually, I met a group of armchair critics. They were all a bit older than myself, and they talked about social issues in Hong Kong. Why people had to queue up for so long to go and see a doctor in a public hospitals. why we have to pay more for bus journeys, why there weren't enough school places, issues of that kind. Frankly, before then, I really didn't think about why society is structured in the way it is, why life isn't more perfect. I didn't really ask those questions. But having asked those questions, I became, I guess, just more attentive to what society was like around me. Then there were other lessons. One of the problems that I have, ladies and gentlemen, is that I can't quite see the PowerPoint. So can you tell me what's my second point? Research. Okay. Well, with this armchair critic group, because I was the youngest member, they said, well, now that we are looking at these social problems that we have in Hong Kong, why don't you write them out? Why don't you do some research? So I would go and look up and say, well, how many doctors do we have, and how do we get to see a doctor? Do we really have to wait a long time? So I did a lot of research, and obviously that deepened my understanding on these social issues. Well, the third thing was, because this armchair critic group had a regular column in a local newspaper, then I was asked to draft these articles in the newspapers. So whilst we all learned how to read and write at school and at university, and I wasn't bad at those things, but to be able to write in another style, which is to write about social issues and to gather just the right kind of relevant facts for that particular article, and to be able to take a view. What do you really think of it? What do you want the government to do? Or what do you want society to focus on? I found writing shorter article where you take a view to be extremely, extremely sobering, because it was very hard. We were limited just with a few hundred words. We had to write regularly, and we had to express a view with a public recommendation. So I learned a lot from that exercise. Can't just go blah, blah, right? Have to organize your thought and get it out. Now, because I was with this group, and I was in my 20s, and at that time, because we took a view, we took a stance on something, then we were often also asked to express our views in public. Sometimes we were interviewed by the press, sometimes we were even on television. So again, to be able to organize those thoughts and to get it out there, your 30 seconds elevator talk in front of the media, again, that was extremely sobering, because you just had to gather your thoughts in a way that you can just say, here's the crux of the issue. Well, then again, I now have a problem in not being able to see what's the next point. You have to help me again. Community organizing, yes. Well, because I fell in with a bad crowd, and because we had opinions, we didn't often agree with authority. We didn't often agree with how the government or, important people were doing things. So we got into community organizing. So I've been to a fair number of petitions and protests and marches. And this became a part of my life in terms of what I did in my private life. Now, in my public persona, actually public and private was in fact just turned the other way around. My day job, the job where I was paid, actually I was trading commodities. In my 20s and my 30s, I was a commodities trader. In my nightlife, in my private life, I was a social activist, a bit of a protester. So I had this sort of dual track in my life. What came as a surprise, so I was already organizing in the community. What came as a surprise to me was in 1992, I was appointed. In those days, it was still possible to be appointed to the legislature. In fact, I was amongst the last group of appointees into the Hong Kong Legislative Council. So when I was appointed to a political position, I realized that I was using all my skills, from obviously political organizing, public commentating, taking a stance on social issues, as well as what I learned in my business life. And I brought it into my political life. And in the end, I ran 2 elections. I was mainly against authority, of course. I also decided, after being in politics for about 10 years, to leave. I thought that politics is great. I'm very interested in the public sphere. But all these very important people who make tremendous decisions for society, we didn't always know what we were doing. I mean, society is full of really complex problems that are not easy to solve. Sometimes politics even extends beyond our own society into the international sphere. Again, these are not easy problems to deal with, like climate change. So I decided to resign, didn't stand for re-election. And I decided to form a non-profit think tank so we can think about solutions. And to my surprise, after thinking about solutions and doing organizing again and being out there connecting with society, I was invited by the current government to join the government in the Environment Bureau, which is my present position. So in my life, I've gone from a normal student to, in a way, an armchair critic role, to being a community organizer, to being in frontline politics for about 10 years, to decide to resign and go back into thinking about solutions. And now, I don't know if this is the last bit of my career in public life again, to be in government, to be then doing the things that I always said government should do. Now the buck stops here. I'm helping to chart policies in the environment in Hong Kong. So it's a very sobering exercise. It is definitely much easier to say what other people should do, but when you have to make the decisions to do it, that takes us into a deeper depth of thought, because we just don't just say it anymore, we have to implement. So I just want to end by saying that there is still only one skill, if I have to pick one skill that has stood me in good stead for the last 25 years, that is the skill of listening. But if I may be permitted, since I have the scouts here, is to say that in my current position in the environment, if there's a chance for us to collaborate more with the scouts in Hong Kong, I'd love to do that. And for the international guests that we have, there is one thing that I hope we can all do, and it's a big campaign in Hong Kong today, and that is not to waste food. I think this is something that we can all take home from wherever you are in terms of not wasting food. In Hong Kong, we throw away 3,600 tons of food waste a day. For those of you who've come from overseas, you've seen those big double-decked buses that we have. 3,600 tons is equivalent to 250 of those a day. When you go home, please ask your own city how much food waste your city throws away every day. I think this is something that we can all do. Let's be more conscious about how we deal with our food. Let's see how we can save food, reduce what our consumption is, and take care of the environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kristen, for insightful presentation relating to skills and further to life itself. And as a matter of fact, the skill for life is one of the main topics, important topics that Scouting is dealing with. So I think your input was really helpful for the rest of our Congress. So thank you very much again. So, before we break for coffee, I'd like to invite my colleague, David Berg, Global Director for Organizational Development at the World Scout Bureau, to provide us with an overview of the program for the rest of today. David, please.
Thank you, Mary. I'm really excited that this event is finally happening. We worked with a global team of over 100 people for a year on this. We worked together with a great host in Hong Kong to make this happen, but it existed until today only in minutes, in meetings, in some online collaboration tools. But today we are all here. We're here with almost 500 people. And what is even more great is that we're not only 500 people in this room, but that there are approximately 2,000 people who have registered until now, and the number is still going up to participate online. As we speak, and you already saw it through the Facebook and the Twitter streams you saw on the screen here, we have people participating. I just saw a tweet, I think half an hour ago, from South Africa, from a scout who was saying, like, it's great, it's 3 a.m. in the morning, but I can follow the live stream of the Congress, and I can be inspired how education, how our scouting organization in South Africa should look on education. So thank you all for being here, and also to all those online participants, thank you very much for participating in this event. So the Congress has a symbolic framework, as you might have noticed, and the symbolic framework is built around a global city. And we start every day with a helicopter view of a global city, which was just provided to you by Ms. Christine Lowe. Now, as the day progresses every day, we will go down into the city and look at the details. The first step is to look at the major parts of the city. That could be the stock exchange, that could be the university, could be the town, the market hall. So that's the first step. And then in the afternoon, we'll even go more deeper and look at very small houses on topics which interest you. This Congress you built yourself. There is a humongous program. We have over 56 sessions happening in the next 3 days. There are more than 15 keynote speakers to choose from. So it's yours to choose based on what you need in your National Scout organization, what you need to be inspired on to create your own program. So, in our next session, we have 4 keynote seminars running in parallel. All those 4 seminars take place on the 11th floor. So you will have to use the elevators. So I encourage you to start in time to move upwards. As you can see, the program follows the same format on each of the 3 days for those 4 keynotes. And so you can choose each day between a keynote speaker from the NGO sector, one from academia, one from the business sector, and one speaker who is in the process of preparing a PhD on a topic of interest to scouting. This morning, we have in stock for you Karen Tse, who is the founder and CEO of International Bridges to Justice, and she will be speaking on the topic of scouting and the new post-2015 Millennium Development Goals. That's option 1. Option 2, from the world of academia, we are very excited to have Dr. Dominique Benard here, who is a very old friend of Scouting. He was a former Deputy Secretary General of the World Organization of the Scout Movement, and he will deliver a presentation titled Rethinking Education, Challenges for Scouting, Lessons for Schooling. From the business world, we have Thomas Frostberg from Sweden, who will be speaking on current global trends in business and the evolution of companies' demand for different personal qualities and skills in young people they are seeking to recruit. And as we know, unemployment for young people is a very key issue today, so this will certainly deliver some very exciting insights. And finally, we welcome Lu Chin Cheng, and now I will have to be very careful on the title. He's the Associate Professor of the Department of Civic Education and Leadership of the National Taiwan Normal University. All right, I did it in one. So he will be speaking on scouting education as a middle school course in Taiwan. Now, this is very exciting because Scouting is really integrated into school and into education in Taiwan, also in a formal way. So this will be very interesting to see how that happens. So those 4 keynotes will happen after the break, and they will go on until lunch, and then we'll take all lunch. And sessions then will recommence in the afternoon from 1500 onwards. Now, as you can see from your program, which is this nice booklet, or you can follow it also on the website, during the afternoon there is a wide range of topics to choose from. We have 11 sessions in parallel. Now, there's a limited number of seats in those rooms. So we encourage you, and you had the possibility already in the last week, to register online for your choice of sessions. You can still do so now. And we encourage you to not wait too long, because already a number of sessions have maxed out. There are only so many seats, and the number you see on the website of maximum of seats available, it's really the maximum number. We cannot put physically more seats into that room. So please register, and if you don't register, then, well, you can still choose, but only from where there's actually space available. Now, what happens still today after those sessions? We have additional sessions delivered from National Scout associations and organizations from around the world. Highlights, exciting insights, things that NSAs think like, this is really a good practice, a best practice, and we'd like to share it with the world. We have the Scouts of Uganda, who will deliver a session on U-Report, which is an SMS-based collaborative tool that is very popular in parts of Africa to engage young people in Scouting and to communicate with each other. We have Jesse, one of the Scout associations from Italy, who will be providing an input on Paths to Courage, which looks at how young people can take up challenges and become agents of change. In the evening, there will be a number of program commissioner network meetings, and one of the key things we will look at there is the future of the Scouts of the World Award. So if you're interested in Scouts of the World Award, you can definitely give us input there on how we should further elaborate on that program. Now, when we break here, we encourage you to discuss further the insights Ms. Christine Lowe gave us with her very inspiring keynote. Our facilitators will engage in some informal discussion methods, so you will see them happening during the coffee break. So please give this a try. Don't just take coffee, but please discuss further. This is a Congress. We encourage you to discuss, be inspired. How can these insights impact on your National Scout organization? It's all very well we're here together today and in the next 3 days, or that we're watching this online. But this Congress will only have impact if we actually take the insights home to our National Scout organizations and discuss how we can better be adapted to deliver Scouting for Life. So, thank you for your attention and contributions this morning. Enjoy your coffee break, and then we'll see you again on the 11th floor. Starting time for the elevators for the next sessions, which start at 11:20. Thank you very much.